Hi, this is Elliot Haspel and welcome to another edition of Best Practices Weekly. Today we're going to be talking about giving effective feedback to students, and this comes from an article from the Review of Educational Research with two university professors, Helen Timperley and John Hattie, talk about this idea of feedback. And actually it turns out that according to many meta-analyses, giving feedback to students is among the top 5 to 10 factors influencing student achievement. Which I don't think we always acknowledge as being quite so important. And so they talk about that there are 4 main ways to give feedback to students, 3 of which can be very effective, one of which we have to be careful about because it can actually have negative impacts if we do it in a certain way. So the first one is feedback on the task, and this is the most common form of feedback. This is just telling the student whether they're right or they're wrong. You answered that math problem correctly, you gave the right answer about what was happening in that reading passage, things like that. Although Timperley and Hattie talk about the fact that we actually need to be sure that when we're giving them right or wrong, telling them whether they're right or wrong, we're saying why. Even a brief written comment on a quiz, study after study has found, can be much more effective than just giving a grade on a quiz with one's marked right or wrong. So students, it's very helpful for them to have the feedback about why was I wrong, like what do I need to think about differently, and similarly for, again, like why was that actually the right answer, just make sure that they know that. The second form is feedback on the processing of the task, and this is all about the strategies that the students are using when approaching the tasks. So, for example, is a student going back to check their notes? Are they looking at previous problems they did that were similar? Or how are they, what is their strategy for looking through and trying to solve these tasks? And if we can give them positive feedback when they're doing really good things, or when we give them constructive feedback about different strategies they might want to try when approaching certain tasks, can again help build their deep critical thinking skills and make sure that they can approach new tasks in similar ways. The third type of feedback is one that the researchers talk about not being as present as we might like to see in classrooms on average, which is this idea of feedback on self-regulation. And this is the attitude and the effort that students bring to a problem, to a task. So if they're getting frustrated, do they actually persevere through that frustration? Do they understand that they're getting frustrated, and do they have a set of tools they can use to move past that? Or do they get frustrated and then just give up and sort of shut down? And so what we can do is we can either give students feedback very positive about, oh, Dick, I love the way that you were getting frustrated there, you didn't know what to do, and so you asked your partner, or you went back and you looked at your notes, things like that. Or if they're getting frustrated and giving up, we can help them be like, well, when we don't know what to do, we can feel frustrated, so here are some tips about things we might want to do when we're told that we're feeling that way. This again really builds in their self-reliancy, their self-sufficiency, and their higher level thinking skills that ultimately let them be autonomous learners. The last type of feedback is one that the researchers say we have to be careful about because it's a pitfall, and this is feedback about the self as a person. And what this means is saying to a student, like, you're doing great, or you're a good girl, you're a good guy. And these are very generalized statements, which the reason they can be dangerous is that if we don't tether them very explicitly to the actions the students are taking, it can reinforce a belief in students that there's just an innate thing of being good, or being great, or being smart, and that it doesn't actually have to do with the different actions that you're taking, that intelligence is not, in fact, malleable. So we want them to understand that actually their effort, their attitude, the actions that they take are what influences how they achieve. Then we need to make sure that if we are giving them feedback about themselves as people, that we're doing it tied to those actions. So they give the example in the article about saying, you're great because when you came to this challenge or this problem, you used this idea or this concept that we learned earlier. So things like that. Or, again, if you were doing a great job because, you really focused in, you were reading for the past 30 minutes, so you're going to really understand what, you read when we talk about it. Things like that. That way you're very much making the link between what the action is and then what the consequence of that action is. So again, to recap really quickly, feedback on the task, it's about being right or wrong, but it's very important that we tell them even briefly why the students are right or wrong. Feedback on the processing of the task, that's all about the strategies that they're using, helping reinforce it when they're using good strategies, or giving them constructive feedback when they need new strategies to use to approach the task. Feedback on self-regulation is about the attitude, the effort that they're bringing to the task, and helping them be very aware of that fact. And lastly, this is very dangerous but potentially fine one of feedback about the self as a person, which is just one we have to be very cautious about the way that we're doing it. So I hope this is helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.